What's up, RotoBallers? Jon Mathisen here, and today I'm going over some of my favorite defense special teams targets for weeks 3 through 7 of the NFL season. So for this video, I'm going to be ranking 5 of my favorite DST targets you can pick up, start, or stream over the next 5 weeks. I'll even throw in a bonus defense at the end. So just as a side note, I'm only focusing on defenses that are rostered in 50% or less of standard Yahoo leagues. Full disclosure, I'm recording this video on Tuesday, September 19th. So the first defense I want to talk about is the Kansas City Chiefs. They're currently rostered in 41% of Yahoo leagues, and they kind of had a dud in week 1. The whole team did, honestly. A disappointing loss to the Detroit Lions to open up the year. They were missing defensive tackle Chris Jones for week 1. He's back though. He made it back last week for week 2 against the Jags. They held the Jaguars to 9 points. Jones had 1.5 sacks. So Jones raises the tide of this entire defense. So the next 2 weeks they host the Bears, and then after that they visit the Jets. The schedule gets a little bit tougher after that. They got Minnesota, Denver at home, Chargers at home, but the next 2 weeks is a big reason why I want to roster this defense. Justin Fields and the Bears have been a complete disaster. He's been sacked 10 times already, thrown 3 interceptions, 2 of which have been pick sixes. He's just been all over the place. Their offense just has no rhythm, and there's a good chance they're going to be playing from behind on Sunday against Mahomes and company. So that just gives the Chiefs defense an opportunity to pin their ears back and just get after Fields and attack him. The Jets don't look great either. Zach Wilson's been sacked 5 times and he's thrown 4 interceptions. Their offense, honestly, is one-dimensional with Wilson under center. And it's up to you if you want to keep this defense past week 4. I know Denver is kind of shaky. Chargers are a little bit scary, but at least they're playing them at home, and I would not start them against Minnesota. That's kind of a tough matchup. The second defense I want to talk about is the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're currently rostered in 17% of Yahoo leagues. They did a great job against the Chiefs last week, holding Patrick Mahomes and company to 17 points. Josh Allen already has 3 sacks to start the season. That's awesome. They really need him to step up this year, and he's well on his way to having a career year. Over the next 5 weeks, they host the Texans at home. Then they head to London to play the Falcons. They follow that up with a trip to Buffalo. They host Indy, and then they head to New Orleans to play the Saints. So earlier I touched on Josh Allen and how he already has 3 sacks. Well, they play the Texans in week 3, and no one's been sacked more than CJ Stroud so far. He's been sacked 11 times. The Houston O-line is just a disaster. So I could definitely see a strip sack fumble in his future. The jury's still out on the Falcons offense. I think they're good, but I'm not really sure about Desmond Ridder. They can definitely run the ball, but games in London involving the Jags over the last 4 years have generally been low scoring. So I think you could start the Jags in that matchup as well. So the Bills are scary on paper, but Josh Allen's definitely prone to turning the ball over. And if you remember 2 years ago, back when Urban Meyer was actually the head coach of the Jags, they beat this Bills team 9-6 at home. So kind of a crazy upset at the time, if people remember. I know team contexts are different now, but I actually like how the Jags match up with the Bills. I think you realistically could start the Jags over the next 4 to 5 weeks and be totally fine. They should give you a decent output. Next, I have the Atlanta Falcons. They have a tough matchup here in week 3. They're heading to Detroit to play the Lions, but the Lions are actually missing David Montgomery. They're not as formidable, I think, as we once thought. Not that I would recommend starting Atlanta, but that matchup isn't as scary as it once was. But after Detroit, their schedule lightens up considerably. They head to London to play the Jags, which I touched on earlier. That could be a low-scoring affair. After London, they get to host Houston and Washington at home before heading to Tampa Bay for week 7. So I already touched on how bad Houston's offensive line is and how many times CJ Stroud's been sacked. Well, Washington quarterback Sam Howell hasn't looked much better than Stroud. He's been sacked 10 times. He's also thrown a pick. He's held onto the ball actually through those 10 sacks, but I could definitely see a fumble coming in his future. So mainly the 2 matchups that I'm most excited about with this Atlanta defense are Houston and Washington at home. I think you could actually play them against the Jags. I wouldn't recommend them against Detroit, but if you're in a pinch, you could definitely roster them for that, and then we'll wait and see on the Tampa Bay matchup in week 7. Now, next we have the Seattle Seahawks. They were a really popular streaming option week 1. They were home favorites against their Cooper Cup-less Rams, and they just laid an egg. They just left a bad taste in everybody's mouth. Offense, defense, special teams, they look bad in all 3 phases. So as a result, their defense shares just dropped. They plummeted. They're only rostered in 9% of Yahoo leagues as of the recording of this video. They had a very solid bounce back in week 2 against the Lions. On the road, they were underdogs. Jared Goff had, I think, the 4th longest streak without throwing an interception in NFL history. Well, they got a pick 6 on him. They forced 2 fumbles. They sacked him. They gave up a lot of points, 31, but their defense was making plays. And first-round cornerback Devin Witherspoon made his debut last week, too. Couple crucial tackles on third down, had a clutch pass breakup. He looked great. He's flying all over the field. They also might be getting Jamal Adams back this week. That'll just add another playmaker to that side of the ball. So they're hosting the Carolina Panthers and rookie quarterback Bryce Young here in week 3. Young has thrown a pair of picks and been sacked 6 times already. He's actually pretty good at getting rid of the ball before he gets sacked or before he kind of takes big hits. But I think the Seahawks defense could get after the Panthers in week 3. And then week 4, they head to Jersey to play the Giants on Monday Night Football. Pete Carroll's actually never lost at the Meadowlands playing the Giants as the head coach of the Seahawks. They beat this same Giants team last year 27-13. And that was when they had Saquon Barkley. There's a good chance they might not have Barkley in that Monday Night Football matchup. Plus, Daniel Jones has already thrown 3 picks. He's been sacked 10 times. He's kind of all over the place, sort of an erratic quarterback. You never know what you're going to get with him. That should be a positive game script for the Seahawks defense. They have a bye in week 5 to get healthy. And then they travel to Cincinnati, which is a little scary in week 6. If you're still rostering the Seahawks defense by then, that could be more of a wait-and-see matchup. And then they host the Arizona Cardinals in week 7. Looks like they're tanking for Caleb. They're in line for the #1 pick. The final defense I want to touch on is the Washington Commanders. Now, their next 2 weeks are a little bit tough, so this is something you want to keep on the back burner. Just keep them in mind for weeks 5 through 7. I would not stream them against Buffalo or Philadelphia. But after that, the schedule lightens up considerably. They host the Bears at home, followed up with a trip to Atlanta, and then after that, they head to the Meadowlands to play the Giants. As of right now, they're tied with Dallas for the league lead with sacks with 10. They're only rostered in 39% of Yahoo leagues. Their front is fully healthy right now. Chase Young was making plays against Denver in week 2, had a sack on Russell Wilson. He looked great. I love them in week 5 at home playing the Bears. That front against Justin Fields, they could sack him 4 to 6 times. One final team I want to touch on. Now they're over the 50% roster threshold we discussed earlier. So maybe they're available in your league, maybe they're not, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. They just exploded on Monday Night Football against the Browns. 2 defensive touchdowns. They're at the Raiders this week, and they followed up with a trip to Houston. So 2 very sackable quarterbacks. If Pitt's available, I'd like them to stream over the next 2 weeks. So to recap some of my favorite DST targets over the next 5 weeks, we have the Kansas City Chiefs, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Atlanta Falcons, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Washington Commanders. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you got some helpful tips from this video. Be sure to follow me on Twitter or X at EasyMath and leave a comment below and let me know who you're thinking about streaming this week or the week after. Be sure to like and subscribe to RotoBaller's YouTube channel for more great fantasy football analysis throughout the season.